Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. And we'll call the meeting of the Plan of Conservation and Development Committee of November 9th, 2022 to order. And introduction of members. Again, my name's Les King. I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, and we can go around and make introductions. You guys want to go around the table, and then we'll come back to Dan and Melinda.
That sounds good. I'll start across the table from me.
All right, Chris LaRose, General Manager, Norwich Public Utilities.
Rick Morrell, Inland Wetlands Chair.
Pat Daly, Police Chief.
Phelps, Director, Community Development. And Deanna Rhodes, Planning and Neighborhood Services Director.
Dan Deniska, I'm the City Planner.
And we have Melinda here.
Order.
Melinda. Hi, Melinda. Can you hear us?
I can, everyone. Hello.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay. And so that's it. We'll do approval of the minutes of July 13th, 2022. These were sent out the other day. Hopefully everybody had a chance to see it, to read them ahead of time. So if everybody's ready, we'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Rick Morrell.
Second, Pat Daly.
Okay, and any discussion, errors or omissions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I'll
Okay.
abstain. Jeff was here for me. last
Okay.
month.
And so,
That's me.
so,
One
One
abstention?
yep.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Under old business, we have none. Under new business, overview of the 4 stakeholder meetings. Who wants to take the lead on this? Deanne or Dan?
That would be me. We had 4 stakeholder meetings over the end of.
Bad connection, Les. You have a really bad connection, Les.
Is that better?
Yes.
That's interesting. I can hear you fine, Les. We had 4 meetings at the end of September and beginning of October. We held them at Foundry 66 downtown. They were, the 4 main topics were.
I think here, I think.
Yeah, this is us, not them.
We think it's us, not you, Dan, because you're getting wonky too.
Okay.
Let's try it again.
Open space, recreation, sustainability and the environment, transportation and facilities, housing, land use and economic development, and retail districts and commercial developments. I've just prepared a number of pages kind of highlighting what we talked about at the meetings. We can just go through. We have the attendees, and then the discussion mainly centered around the city's strengths, progress that we've made since the last POCD was adopted, current issues and needs, and threats, and how the city can provide better support. And we had a number of people attend each meeting. Some people attended all 4. I'll just provide a brief synopsis of what is mentioned here. So the first one is really the open space and recreation meeting. Mohegan Park is a gem. A lot of people said we should add land surrounding it and incorporate it into the park, that the city can take advantage. There was some land a few years ago that was given to the city that I believe is not currently incorporated into the park, but do you remember? I remember it coming to CCP. I don't know if the council had to do something.
We accepted it, and I think we said to make it part of the park, but I don't think they actually officially merged it. I think the recommendation in the plan should be to merge those things too, to
Right.
make sure you get included, because then there's no question they can't be split off and sold,
Right. And then we talked a lot about how the riverfronts and the harbor are natural wonders that are an asset to the city, and the expansion of the Heritage Walk and greenways and walking paths along our river corridors. And then there was a lot of talk about the reservoirs, how they're an untapped asset that could be opened up for passive recreation. And I don't know if people want to stop and have discussion as we go along. There's a slight delay. It sounds like someone might be starting to speak in 335, but I'm not sure.
Nope, no delay, but no one's speaking.
Okay. Progress made in the last 10 years. The utility GIS department has mapped the trails within Mohegan Park, and they were recently repainted and reblazed for people to follow through the park. The maps are posted in a couple spots in kiosks. The city is going to be developing a recreation master plan. When we had the meeting, it was still in the purchasing department, getting ready to be released. And there's going to be a community input section to that plan. Issues and needs. We talked about having a definition of open space for the city, aligning our open space requirements with the state's requirements. They require 10% of land to be set aside for open space. A lot of talk about ADA accessibility, how we should include it as an overarching theme in the POCD and allow passive and active rec areas and open space to be accessible. We have a very low $100 per lot open space fee in our subdivision regulations that needs to be updated. The discussion has started at CCP and it's kind of gone around in a lot of circles and it's on hold now. There was talk of increasing it or tying it to a real estate market study when larger developments come in. We talked about protections for non-development should be strengthened, maybe mapping the walk shed for each neighborhood park, how long the area is accessible for a quarter mile or a half mile. A lot of talk about kayaking, getting around the dams, Greenville to Ockham Dam, water-based recreation, public access and parking, and being able to put in and take the kayaks out to get up and around the dams to continue on to either go downtown or further north. There was talk about developing some kind of waterfront recreational access behind the cemetery on Norwich Avenue in the Friendship Street area. There's a lot of land back there and has riverfront access. Again, the walking trails along the river should be expanded, connecting the reservoirs with Mohegan Park to begin to form an emerald necklace of sort of open space in the city, and explore or amend or repeal the ordinance regarding dogs in Mohegan Park.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
City strength, did anyone bring up the work we're doing over at Uncas Leak?
No, we did not, but we could add that in here because that's certainly a strength.
Thank you.
And has anyone brought up the public utility land between Ockham, short of 395, that goes all the way up to Tackle as part of an open space emerald necklace type walkway?
So is that TAPCO 1, 2, 3 dams?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, so for passive recreation, we can definitely work with that.
Great.
If there's no other comment, we can move on to threats. We talked about mitigating the impact of at the time, the drought was still going strong, global warming, controlling invasive species at a community level, and kind of clarifying who does what the city is responsible for, and prioritizing. That's kind of a massive topic to try to tackle and even have in the POCD. And it's a regional thing. It doesn't stop at the city line, that's for sure. And there was talk of creating a standalone open space plan to complement the POCD and the recreation master plan. And then how can the city provide better support? We talked about studying the creation of more formal playgrounds for neighborhoods, collaborating with the Trust for Public Land on playgrounds. They work with distressed communities. They have a national goal of a park within 10-minute stroll or rolling for all neighborhoods. Work with the state.
And
I just, do you want me to just do it here and have it?
how many programs you have open. Do you need every program?
well,
I don't
if you're-
think there's anything
Are you
open in
connected
here.
Wi-Fi or you have?
This was already
I have
set up.
cellular on here. So,
I can turn it off and just do cellular. Can't we do that on here?
oh, if you got cellular on there, you can, yeah,
Hold on.
that'll probably
let's-
work better than what we
hold on.
got.
Dan, can you hold on one second? We're just
Sure.
gonna- just for a second.
Am I not coming through?
You're really like,
Your warbler.
Oh,
No, I can hear you fine.
Do it
Yeah, I can hear you
Internet.
perfectly, Les.
You
too.
want
It's
us to
definitely in the
like-
room.
to turn off the,
Why do you think you have cellular on this computer?
I don't know. I just thought that we might. You don't think
They
so?
don't.
think,
I
yeah, it's a
have it on my
laptop.
iPad.
I don't know if we'll have that.
Alright.
So to say, do you need this? You don't need this up right now, do you?
No, it was just to log on.
You got a bunch of things running. All right, now Zoom is just running, but let's have.
So Dan, can you talk again? Let's see if it works better.
Sure. The city should focus on creating a park on the K Park property in the next 10 years.
Hmm.
Is that a little clearer?
Yes,
Okay. It's definitely the room because everybody else is clear, crystal clear.
okay.
So where are we? Allow for community gardens on vacant land in neighborhoods. Create a citywide map of open space and levels of accessibility. That relates to ADA.
Mhm.
Talk about easement access to the waterfront to provide for greenways along the river corridors. And work with the railroad companies to explore the viability of rails with trails. So trails next to existing active freight lines. And then provide an active dog walking area outside of the city's dog park.
Mhm.
Right. So one thing I don't see here is partnering with conservation groups such as Avalonia. I know they have, I think they've done their first conservation in Norwich, but they've done a great job down on the coast. And they were also looking at doing one up in Montville near our reservoir that we worked with them a little bit, but there are maybe other groups as well, but I know that,
Well, they've done two in Norwich now. They bought
Yeah.
a property and then they're also, the Hunters property, was it Hunters Avenue? Dan, those properties, we also,
The Hunter's Brook, yeah,
Hunters properties, yeah,
where
those
that residential development was gonna
to
happen.
Apollonia. So no, I think that's a good idea. So how can the city provide better support is, let's just, I'm gonna make a note, Apollonia.
but the city can buy the property or a land trust like that can buy the property and they will go in, they'll maintain
Mhm.
trails and create trails. And it just kind of maybe with a partnership, you can get more.
Well, that's
more
what we're
done.
doing with that, the Hunters Brook stuff, all those acreage we gave to Apollonia. They're creating the parking area there. They're gonna create the walking trails and things on that site. And then they bought other property in the city as well. So that one they didn't buy from us. The city gave that to them to manage that open space. But no, it's a good idea to make sure we put that in here.
Yeah, especially if you're already working with them by
Yep,
the reservoir in Montville, and that,
yeah. I
excellent.
know that Alana Sherman's really active in that land trust, so.
so I can move on to the second meeting, unless anybody has any other comments on the first meeting there.
Go ahead, Dan, move on.
The second one was transportation facilities. That was on September 28th. Just jumping into the strengths, the Heritage Trail is an asset that should be expanded and highlighted. We talked about a photo trail along the corridor. I think Regan may have brought that up, and we probably want to explore more what she meant about that.
Mhm.
We talked about, we have multiple park and ride lots along 395 and working with MPU for EV charging stations and larger multifamily developments like Panema or West Ledge, shopping centers, Bacchus, NFA. And then Pat had mentioned that basketball is huge in Norwich and the city needs to embrace and invest in it. We talked about alternative fuel vehicles in the fleet. EVs are on the horizon. We should be well poised to take advantage of that. And then just the general location along the Northeast corridor, how we're close to all the major cities, either as a live and commute place or trying to pull in people from other areas. Progress in the last 10 years, we recently adopted a complete streets policy, and we have plans that can create a complete streets plan to implement projects in appropriate areas. And we've gotten a number of transportation funding opportunities in the last few years related to complete streets. So Dunham Street, New London Turnpike, and the Chelsea Harbor Mobility Study that's moving forward. Issues and needs, there's a lot of transit talk here. Greater frequency of the bus service along Mahan Drive. The Meadow Shopping Plaza in Norwich Town needs a formalized bus stop and a shelter. The business park needs more frequent service for residents and employees at the laundry and the gym, for instance. The proposed Business Park North will need seat service. There's going to be a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway incorporated into the design of the new roadway through the park, which leads to the opportunity to create a trail network within the park on the different parcels that's sensitive to the environment. We talked about how the BPN would require a new interchange, geometry fixes at exit 18. We talked about adding mountain bike trails to Mohegan Park, work with the Northeast Mountain Bike Association to cut the trails for recreational tourism.
So I think that is happening now because Dave Poor, our GIS manager, is doing that and working with them. So I know he's actively doing that. So maybe just
Oh, that's great.
change.
Nothing better than a check mark next to it. That's awesome. We talked about potentially using power line corridors for mountain bike trail networks. And then moving on, the intersection of Lafayette, Sachem, and Sherman Streets is one of our redevelopment nodes. And we talked about the possibility of putting a roundabout in there, kind of making it feel like it has a sense of place.
Dan, can you stop for a second? Chris had a comment.
Absolutely.
Oh, well,
Chris had a comment on
Well,
power lines.
well, I'm a mountain biker and I don't bike in power lines. They tend to be more straight up and down, and
And
it's
then
not
just the
conducive to it.
security aspect of it, tempting pit, attractive nuisance, to quote Mike Driscoll's term.
Yeah.
I climb the pole and just do bad things, and then they're right away, so I don't know if we'd even have the right to.
Yeah.
So we have some transmission right away, very small amount, a couple miles in North. The majority of that is Eversource.
Yeah,
Like if you go through Business Park North, that's all Eversource
Eversource,
power
so-
lines. Up by the Plain Hill, Yannick Lane, up in the top of Yannick Lane, crossing where they have the
Mhm.
tennis courts up there. That's all
but yeah.
Eversource
I mean,
transmission lines.
so I guess what everyone should know is these are the comments that have come up in the meetings. It doesn't mean that we're going to move forward with those necessarily in the plan of conservation development. So I think it's a good point to I'll make note of that so that that's not something that, we definitely want to push on if we're feeling that it's a security issue or an issue. I mean, we
Yeah.
take everybody's comments, but doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to be included,
Right. And another thought was, I think in areas where maybe you needed a quarter mile of connection to get from one place to another, we could approach them with having some kind of access way. And not necessarily the entire corridor is also used for that, because they need the right of way to get their vehicles in there and whatnot. Or it's just not passable and they're using helicopters in some of the areas. So just a comment, like Deanna said.
Yep.
Again, mention of the Heritage Trail. Everyone loves the Heritage Trail. Everyone wants there to be more segments added to it.
But they also mentioned that they don't like it that it's cut up onto the road. They really want to get the access along the river. So it's gonna, which is a little harder to get those right of ways, but it's where it comes off and then kind of goes through the neighborhood and then comes back down. Several comments were about that. Why do we have to do that? And why can't we, go
Yeah,
across?
it's easy
So.
to kind of get distracted and off, and it's not very scenic.
Yeah, so if we can, so maybe it's working on expanding the heritage, we want to go eastward, but maybe the other direction, if that's west, I guess it would be. We would maybe see about trying to get easements on the properties or something. I don't know.
Right.
Now, when we are redesigning our force main, if there's anything that we need to get right of ways for as part of that, we would easily make it into a walkway over the top of it.
And that could be a
Yeah.
recommendation
I mean-
in the plan too, that if NPU is getting easements, that we look at, are there any of those available to us to use for transportation purposes,
Yeah. Especially for sewer easements and things like that. Absolutely.
Do we doing the interceptors?
Well, we're gonna be redoing some of the interceptors as
I mean,
part of
would
it.
we put a walking bridge over the interceptors where they cross the river to bring the Hollyhock Island? Tie it into,
Yeah, that's more than 5 years out.
I was just kind of kicking around to.
But that,
If you did the
But-
Yannick River East, get that interceptor over, cut through Hollyhock Island, and then you're on the other side, and then you got that whole side of the Yannick River behind US, not US Foods, Old Rosslers, whatever it is.
yep.
The ice cream place.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, mini melts.
Mini
Yeah.
melts.
Yeah, I get in trouble.
Right up
for
the
saying it
river,
wrong.
right up there, right to that Bacchus area, right on the train track. Just
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So what we could make that as some kind of recommendation in the plan too, that that's a consideration all the time.
Yeah.
All right, keep going, Dan. I don't want to derail you. I'm sorry.
Then jumping, no problem. Jumping to the corridor along Washington Street from the end of the Route 2 connector down to NFA and downtown is very congested at times. We are currently working with the COG
Mhm.
to try to get a study with DOT to explore potential solutions. We talked about putting a roundabout at the end of the connector, adding a direct ramp from Route 2 to the hospital, get all of those vehicles off of that short section of Washington out front. We also talked about the idea of a footbridge over the river from the satellite parking lot on Matlack Road to the hospital campus for employees. There is, MPU does have power lines that go through there over to the hospital. Continue to explore the possibility of swapping the Route 2 and 2A designation through Norwich, possibly turning Route 2 into 2A to make it a scenic corridor and allow for traffic calming measures. Plant more trees along Broadway and Washington Street.
Short trees that don't go into power lines.
Right. Appropriate street trees.
So, yes, so just, yeah, just be careful of what we do, because you put something in, it grows, and we trim it, and then we are, in trouble.
Yeah, well, when I was in Portland, we did a whole booklet on street trees, depended on where the power lines are, what you could use for the tree species and everything. So it gave multiple species, but it was like the small, the medium and the tall, and it really worked well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we got some information on our website as well on that.
keep going.
We're involved in the Shoreline East Extension Study to bring rail service to Norwich via Groton and New London on either side of the river. And we talked about incorporating the intermodal transportation center into that.
Mhm.
Then we jump to parking enforcement and signage and information. Signage and information within and without the garages downtown. A lot of people are confused as to whether they can park there or what time they can park there. We talked about parking turnover and off hours use to maximize the spots that we have available. Employees during the day and residents at night type of thing, or on the weekends. The perception of safety and cleanliness in the garages and lighting and daylighting stairwells, possibly. And then completely jumping to a different subject, the idea of splash pads, which Pat had brought up, and I'm completely on board with 2 small kids. And then moving on to threats.
All right, so just go back a step.
Sure.
Intermodal Transportation Center,
Mhm.
was that mentioned at all?
It was.
And should we consider making that more of a usable structure than it is now?
It was in here. That's where we talked about that.
Yeah, so we wanted to incorporate it we'd like to have the rail station be
Yes.
on that section of the rail line right across,
Okay, yep.
bridge, the
So you need
river.
bridge, yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what-
Flyover like they have in Old Saybrook.
Exactly. So then we know we'd have the transportation center would be better utilized and.
Yeah. But if that doesn't go forward, I know there's talk of tying it into marina parking and other things, and just, I don't know, just in general,
So let's,
just find a better utilization for it.
all right.
Seats not,
Yeah.
closing their office in there, and there's not much with seats off in there as well.
Okay. I made a note.
Sometimes there are weird attachments to the money depending on what type of federal money builds it, where you can't use it for residential purposes. And so I know there's the little commercial space in there that's difficult to rent, and
Yeah, Tucker.
sometimes if it's built with a certain pot of federal money, then you kind of can't make money off of it. So it's hard to charge a place rent to operate a business. So it really ties you up at times. So we need to look into that more to see what's allowed and what's not.
Mhm. And maybe the recommendation is investigate alleviating some of those restrictions off of it,
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and then the last thing you mentioned was splash pads, and there was a proposal last year to put a splash pad in, and it was one where they were just using potable water, and it just went down the drain. And it was a huge waste of water, especially when we were concerned about droughts and things like that. It just didn't look good, feel good. And when we said, you have to do it, you know, so you
With
recycle the
recycled
water,
water, yeah.
then it added a bathroom requirement, chlorination and licensing and everything else. And it got too expensive and too complicated. But
Mhm.
I think a splash pad done well is a good idea.
I'll be honest with you, Chris, I was thinking when I proposed it was one per neighborhood, at least one per section of town.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have marginalized and underserved populations that,
Mhm.
you know, one in Mohegan Park might not do the kid on Fairmont Street any good.
Yes.
You know, so let's try to co-locate again with our basketball thing. Let's have a good basketball court, let's have a splash pad in at least every section of town, your west side, your center, your Tassel, your Norwich Town.
Yeah, and that might be more appropriate when they do the parks plan to have that in there than specifically in the plan of conservation development, because they are doing their facilities parks plan and make sure that that gets in there.
I don't think there's any harm in mentioning it.
No, no, no.
Just so that people start thinking that way.
Yep.
You know, it's worked really well in cities, throughout the state. You know, low-cost alternative for summer recreation.
Yeah, and I think if you had somebody who could manage it, it would be, you could do it well recycling. If you just say, oh, I want the ease, the cheapest way to put it in and get it up and going and just wasting the water, it's gonna be a big water bill down the road for the city.
Mhm.
You'd have to run those numbers, and that's, I'm not
Yeah.
the number guy. Yeah, I would see what other cities are doing. man.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, Dan, you can go on.
Okay. The threats, obviously, money is an issue always. Money is needed for infrastructure repair.
All right.
Street maintenance is necessary and funding is needed to keep up a state of good repair. And then it was mentioned about reevaluating the state's building occupancy in City Hall and downtown. That's, I don't know if that's necessarily a POCD issue or not.
And more of a fire marshal issue?
Yeah, I don't remember who brought that up and what that was about. What was the,
I think it was, well, part of this was transportation and part of it was facilities. So it was needing space and making sure also that state employees are still downtown. They're not leaving and going to an industrial park or
Right.
somewhere off of
Oh,
a bus line type of thing.
all right,
Get rid of DCF in the Shannon building. I think
Yeah.
they were-
yeah, keeping him downtown. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. I couldn't remember that.
How can the city provide better support?
a room kind of thing.
No, it's down here, and then, actually, some of it was the City Hall talk. You know.
Of the states using
Keeping
their
the
space
marshals
here and
here
that
the
kind of stuff.
states, Yeah, they don't have the building, so it's.
Yeah. The POCD can support the park and rec master plan. We talked about creating pedestrian zones where we're prioritizing sidewalk rehab along transit corridors. That'll fold into the complete streets plan when that happens. The POCD can support the creation of a complete streets master plan. We talked about investigating the relocation of the police station,
Mhm.
preparing we're required to have an ADA transition plan. That needs to be undertaken at some point. Explore the establishment of a community center, either as a standalone building or incorporated into a school building. The school's referendum passed last night, so that changes that conversation a little bit. Relocating adult and human services into a community center, making sure it's on a seat route. Pat had brought up the Johnston, Rhode Island Municipal Rec Center as something that we should look into for Norwich. We want to review public works facilities for space or locational needs. There's some flood zone issues.
Mhm.
A regional training facility for police and fire, work with the COG and area towns,
Mhm.
and then micromobility, scooters, e-bikes, rideshare, etc. And make sure that we incorporate top recommendations from regional planning documents,
Mhm.
that they're in alignment.
I don't consider the city as a biker, a friendly place to bike.
Mhm.
It really need to get I think the bike paths and safer streets before you start enticing people to start riding
Yeah,
bikes.
and that's what, again, looking at, complete streets is a good start. The road diet, scrunching down the lanes.
Mhm.
They're making the lanes very narrow now, so I think that may increase some, but we're we're handicapped by some of the most beautiful architecture on 12-foot wide streets.
Mhm.
And what you want to show off, the streets incredibly narrow, one-way streets, hills. So it's, you know, the recreational bikers can climb the side of a mountain, but it's your average
were not.
citizen that, you know, want
So
to go
Dan must
pedal
have
up,
it there.
you know, School Street.
We're in the last one too.
But I think it's something we gotta look into if we, since the adoption of the complete streets that Deanna championed, I think that will help us
Mhm.
at least force us to look at bike lanes and to do stuff like that.
Mhm.
When we can. Sometimes we're just up against road width.
Maybe
Yep.
that was the sign issue for the deck. Okay.
Yep. I'm all over the bike lanes and the sidewalks. It's definitely a passion project of mine. So,
I'm all in too. I think
Yeah.
It's just the architecture of some of these streets.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And some of them, they are narrow, but if we can just slow people down by design, then you can ride a bike on a 25-mile-an-hour street. And
We could do some share up, you know, some shared too.
So the next meeting, just in the interest of time and me wanting someone else to talk at some point, Housing, Land Use and Economic Development was October 5th.
Hey, Dan, real quick. So
Sure.
Sydney's here and she said her and Kate were not at that meeting. Was that the sign-in sheet that was lost or, you know, there's a confusion? Because the October 5th one, she said they were not there at that
I
one.
only came to the last one.
They only came to the last one.
Okay, then, all
Cole, I think, was actually who was the person at the last meeting that I met, not Amanda.
So
right, then we're missing the sign-in sheet from this third meeting then, Deanna.
Okay, so the third meeting, so this is the
Yeah.
fourth meeting, sign in. Okay.
We'll figure that out. We'll have
Yeah.
to rack our brains. City strengths, we recently signed up with Citizen Lab Community Engagement Hub, which will be immensely helpful in all aspects of city and resident communication moving forward. Our interdepartmental and interagency coordination is a strong asset that's not presented in surrounding towns in the neighborhood. MPU is an asset and should be leveraged for economic development. Progress made in the last years. We've been at the forefront of cannabis manufacturing development, and NCDC has been focused on what they call BREAD, which is business retention, expansion, attraction, and development. Issues and needs, funding opportunities for housing rehab, for utility related issues, to improve our older housing stock, make it more efficient and modernize it. Department of Energy grants. Historic homes in districts have a different set of challenges due to costs. We talked about assessment freezes for home improvements for X amount of years. Blight exterior improvements are somehow incentivized to clean up properties, maybe forgivable loans. Potentially expanding historic districts to open up new opportunities for people or funding pathways. Kind of a team approach to blight between the health department, public works, human services, and planning and neighborhood services. We talked about incorporating the Greenville NRZ into Citizen Lab to kind of get them online and get them engaged with the community. Looking at the shared housing definition and the zoning regs, HUD Section 8 vouchers, short-term rentals, community character merged into economic development along with historic assets, and then tourism, historic resources, and energy. These are all just notes that were here. The only threat I could find in our discussion was the potential right sizing of Dodd Stadium, reimagined how it could use, or maybe it ends up, going away and that all that land is repurposed for another economic development opportunity. How can the city provide better support? We have an unadopted economic development plan from 2015 that should probably be updated and actually adopted at some point.
Was that a Jason initiative? I don't remember that.
No, that was done by Gary. Gary Evans was working on it. It was before my
Okay.
time. So when I started, they were still talking about it and they never adopted it. Debbie
Yeah.
was the mayor at that time, so I don't know what was going on.
Okay.
Just leveraging our economic asset of the waterfront for development and redevelopment, electric boats expansion and the pipeline, offshore wind, recreational tourism. Again, the rivers and the waterfront. We also talked about Cannabis tourism, that's big in other states. It's coming. The blue economy and green energy, people living in Norwich and working remotely somewhere else. You know, quality of life, things are cheaper, lower cost, it's accessible. The Business Park North, strategic plan for the marina and the waterfront, strategic plan or an RFP for the Norwich State Hospital property. Resource NCDC to accomplish its tasks. I think that's a funding comment. Some kind of marketing arm for the city of Norwich. MPU provides all services. We have all these assets. Opportunity zones for a trade zone. Get DCD and DEEP on the same page about developing near the water. Get the work to get the state to place the entire city in the enterprise zone. It's odd that we're the second most distressed community in the state. We kind of feel like that should get us involved in more programs that aren't limited to just certain parts of town. Explore cultural districts, which there's a meeting coming up relatively soon about that for downtown. TOD and, you know, developing the Yantic node area more than what it is now.
Right. So I've heard this in the past, and I know nothing about this because I'm not a real fisherman, but I know in other economic development meetings in the past and other things, they've talked about trying to target the fishing industry, trying to get striper tournaments and things like that in Norwich, and there's some value there. And I don't know if that's worth adding.
Well, it is, because remember, who was it? Charlie Jaskowitz?
Yeah.
He did one, and it was incredibly successful, right out of the marina downtown. A striper tournament, probably 8 years ago, 10 years ago now. It was incredibly successful, because there are the fishes, you know, in good numbers in the river.
And I think it's kind of like an underknown asset in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. The 7 years that I was working up in Worcester, I met countless people in the 40 towns I was in that would come down to Norwich specifically to fish at Brown Park. And I was blown away. It's shocking.
Dan, you're right. It really is a destination for the fishing people.
But it's not marketed as such.
No.
Yeah,
No, yeah,
Two tournaments a year, just think of the economic development, just even for the downtown restaurants, it could make or break a weekend.
and if I can jump in on that also, several years ago, this is back in the 2008, 2009 period, we were talking about that and how to put that system in place. One of the biggest things that we could do is to put a camera down on the waterfront, because people in Massachusetts, New York get up at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning to travel to go fish, and they look at the remote cameras to see what the conditions are out on the rivers. And that's what makes them decide where to go. And Norwich would be a big draw for Norwich if they had that access where people could go online and see what the conditions are here, especially in the winter.
Put a camera in. I just don't know where
I think it's on the roof of the police station. I don't know what website it's on. It's probably on the city website, but that camera was built.
That camera, what?
It was,
Is in.
Put in years ago.
Okay, yeah, so that'd be something just to get the information out on how to get access to it.
Yeah,
Because for fishermen, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal for.
Tucker drove the bus on that one.
yeah. And if it's there and it's super old and we need a new one with higher resolution where you can really see, then that's something we should
It's not a
explore.
shoestring budget, so I don't. think
Yeah.
It was anything grand, but I do believe it's operational.
And then, yep.
No, I thought if we were moving on to the next section, I was gonna ask Pat, do you remember if you were on the October 5th meeting? Because I think who was there was Kevin, I think Mary Riley was there, I think Regan was there. Did you go to more, you went to more than one
I
meeting?
went to two.
You went to the first two, I
First
think.
two, yeah.
So I think that meeting, on the second meeting, we had Pat Daly there. Alana Sherman was there.
That's
wasn't
somebody
she?
from COG who
Yeah, we always,
had
that,
a name for
Nic-
Hollyhock Island that I never heard.
Nicole Hargitay was there.
Yeah.
And then I had to call Mike Driscoll, who had also never heard of that name. But it is a valid,
Is it really? What'd she call it?
I forgot.
Was
I
it
was
good or
trouble
bad?
because I pride myself on my Norwich knowledge.
Ah,
And I was like, she's dropping that name. And I was like, what is that? And Mike, we researched it.
oh, So,
It's
but I
not
think,
me,
but Alana Sherman was there too at
Yes,
that
she
meeting.
was.
See, that was the one
Yeah.
with
She
Alana
talked about
Sherman
the
was
land
there.
trust.
Yep.
She came to two. She definitely came to the first one.
Hmm, I don't know. No, she only came to one, but I don't, do we have her on the first one? I don't see
Yeah.
her on the first one.
Was she a two or just the first?
She's not up here, but she definitely came to the first one.
Yeah.
But she talked about open space and ADA.
And the land trust, she talked about that.
Yeah, but we have that sign-in sheet though.
Yeah, she must not have signed it, but I'll add her to this list here.
Okay, because I know she was there, but okay. I'm sorry, keep going. We're on.
Nope, that's fine.
Fine.
We'll figure it out. The fourth meeting we did a little different. I had set up a grid on the whiteboard and it was all about retail districts and commercial development. So we had these 4 quadrants and it was manage and maintain, which is, regular investments to maintain an area, capital investments, promotion, marketing, enhancements to tenant mix. And then there was great potential, where is everyone?
Mhm.
And we push investment through increased density, transportation improvements, and signage. Then there was starting over, which is the area needs significant redevelopment and physical improvements. And then it's a place to shop. Why should I stay here? Why would I stay here? And that was physical connections to trip chain and add character. So we had a bunch of areas that we plugged into the matrix, and I'll just kind of go through, and the comments are brief. So West Main Street and Salem Turnpike as a corridor, we plugged it in as a place to shop, but why would I stay here? So we talked about the roundabouts are a significant improvement. We need some commercial redevelopment, put liner buildings closer to the sidewalk to create a feeling of urban density, and comprehensive signage ordinance to create visual uniformity. So it's not a sea of signs that are
The Berlin
all
Pike,
different.
yeah.
Berlin Turnpike. And then Town Street was also a place to shop. Why stay? We need sidewalks, period lighting, a permanent bus stop at the Meadow Shopping Plaza. Make it really feel like a village center feel. Pull buildings up to the roadway, facade changes, and add some mixed use. Exit 14 in Norwich Town. Again, a place to shop. Why stay? It's kind of the gas station district. Extend sidewalks and lighting to Bean Hill, signage to historic sites and traffic calming. Yantic Village is a great potential. Where is everyone? Traffic calming, there's flood issues. West Town Street is not very attractive in that area. We talked about redeveloping the old nursery site, potential National Historic District, and make Yantic Village feel less disconnected from everything else. And the hotel will help with that. But it also provides opportunity for spin-off businesses and getting people to walk around and leave the hotel and explore a little bit.
Yep.
Laurel Hill, we plugged into everything. We need to maintain the housing stock. There's a lot of code issues to address. Sidewalks are in terrible shape. We talked about creating a National Historic District there. There's parking needs due to the road being so narrow. We talked about satellite lots for some of those Victorians that are built right up to the street, period lighting, upgrades to the park. There's commercial opportunities around the VFW and the school, the old school. There's the state hospital at the end. It said explore issuing an RFP for development. The school up there is scheduled to be decommissioned. And then the neighborhood will kind of be disconnected from its school. There's an opportunity with whatever happens on that site. Taffill Village, which is just the village itself, kind of the letter streets. Maintain, it needs a grocery store somewhere in the area with all of the new apartment development. The mini market's gone. Exit 18 is a mile away, but you wouldn't know it. Taffill, signage saying, south to Taffill, City of Norwich, TVCCA is there. They've mentioned they may relocate to provide that area for some commercial development. And then Greenville, we broke into a couple sections. Central Avenue was manage and maintain. There's great potential. Where is everyone? There's needs for laundromats, commercial businesses. a satellite office for Foundry 66 for a business incubator.
Mhm.
The Leader Store buildings lighted. There's a lot of code correction in the neighborhood, housing quality, some kind of grant program for historic properties. And then North Main Street, we listed as starting over. K Park, taking that down and turning it into a beautiful green space, bike lanes and sidewalk improvements, street trees. Chris, I know there's a ton of wires above North Main Street, but maybe on the side where the poles don't run. Pedestrian scale lighting. North Main Street's very fast compared to Central Avenue. Commercial development and redevelopment of those sites, and then Atlantic packaging into something like a Velvet Mill in Stonington. Norwich Avenue was starting over. Starwood needs to be torn down. The Wonder Bar needs to be torn down. There's a big opportunity for riverfront recreation behind those areas. There's big time drainage issues. We talked about solving that while adding a roundabout at Boswell and North Main. Improve signage to the monument, infill housing and street trees. Taft Station, which is that intersection of Hunters and Jewett City Road, the Dairy Queen area. Add some density there. It's great potential, whereas everybody and starting over. A lot of transportation improvement, signage, housing. It's kind of rough around there. There's big opportunities for river recreation and kayak launches. There's the Eagle Cam out there. Moving to Ockham, again, great potential. Where is everybody? Signage work, park and ride. People live in their cars there at times when they don't have housing. Some kind of info center in the village. The intersection where Mr. Pan's is a safety hazard. Housing solutions related to the business park. There's potentially all those jobs there, and workforce housing could be developed in Ockham because we don't want housing in the park. There's the multi-use path going from Route 97 up into the park. It's a recreational opportunity or a walking opportunity to go to work. We need seat to run a bus line into the park, and we need to make sure we don't displace low-income residents with the park coming online. And it's isolated. It's really far north. There's no social services in the neighborhood. Downtown plugs into all four quadrants. There's a need for a fresh food market, big time wayfinding need. Chestnut Mill is always on the table. Traffic calming, we're working on that. Expanding the park, we're working on that. Link the marina, more housing, parking signage, shared parking, like I mentioned earlier. East Main Street is everything as well. There's parking challenges over there. We talked about recreation opportunities with the rivers. A lot of code correction, traffic calming. It's 25-mile-an-hour street. People fly down it, just passing through. Historic district, mixed use, period lighting, tie it in with downtown. It's just the small bridge between the two. It feels like another world. Moving to Thamesville, there was a starting over. Redevelop Shipping Street and Terminal Way. Historic designations, extend the sidewalk all the way to Mohegan Sun. There's just a small gap that's missing, and then the bridge. The southern end of the corridor needs some attention. Connecting Uncas on Thames with Three Rivers. They're so close, yet you have to go miles around. Lighting improvements. Exit 11 over on the west side, Maplewood Court zoning. The Walmart parking lot is massive, and it could fit a building out front for some infill development. There's the big parcel at the foot of Wauwikis, and Mahan School will be probably some of the most prized commercial lands if the school's plan moves forward. And the last one is Lafayette Street, which is also we'd like to see some 3 to 4 story buildings for redevelopment in the node there. It's walkable to the hospital. It's our largest employer. Mixed use and density, some kind of a medical live work play district. Uncas Leap is happening. It's going to be really great, and it's so close. We mentioned some kind of art installation on the side of the old TV repair shop right at the intersection. Putting a roundabout in there, trees, lighting, and a pedestrian connection from Lafayette to Uncas Leap because the sidewalks are in rough shape.
Yep.
I'm going to take a break from speaking for 52 minutes here. We do have next on the agenda the slide deck, which is phase 1 that we're working with a consultant to prepare. I don't know if everyone had a chance to look through all 60 slides.
And just so you know, Dan and I have already been meeting him. We went over every slide and made corrections and asked questions, and there's things that still need to get filled in the blank. Like the housing authorities information. We need to know how many units they have, where they have it, that kind of stuff. So instead of going through all of this, if everyone has it, does anyone have any specific questions or comments that we can pass along to the consultant? We already have a lot to them, but is there anything else that you have?
Yeah, Deanna, I have something. I want to say, and I don't have it, I think it's on page 29, right around that area.
Okay, go there. Go ahead.
If that's the right one.
Page 29 is home sale.
No, that's not the right one. Okay, I'm sorry. It was a section that talks about community groups. It talked about downtown NRZ. And I didn't see any mention in there of the Greenville NRZ in there. And I told you the wrong page. I was thinking about something else. I'm sorry. But where it talks about NRZs, and the Greenville NRZ is still extremely active. They still meet at least once a month. And
Probably in our comments that we gave to them. I just don't have my comments in front of me. Let's see.
okay. Because we can pretty well give them credit for doing the applications to get all the sidewalks down on Central Avenue, all the period lighting on Central Avenue. They were tremendous support on supporting the security lighting down there and or security cameras down there. So they're still a very active group that meets once a month at the Greenville
Fire department.
Firehouse, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Dan, is there a way that you can control F and like
I think it's
find it that way?
46.
He's
Downtown
he's
neighborhood
thinking
revitalization.
46.
Page 46.
Yeah, that's what she's
Yeah,
saying.
I can't remember why I said 20. There was something on 29 I was looking at too, but
Downtown neighborhood revitalization, Chelsea Arts District. Nope, not there.
I thought, okay.
That's not.
right. So if we could put something in there, because they are still very active and they have been for the last 20 years. So that'd be a good group to really get engaged with.
Well,
Yeah, and less, some of the things is they're consultants, so we got a slide from them that talked about the housing authority in Norwich, New York. So
Yeah.
we're going through everything with the Fine
Yeah.
Tooth Comb and
Yeah, it'll take some time. The housing authority in Norwich, 868 units is significant impact on the town. That's how many we own.
yeah,
The housing authority, and all of that should be in there because that is a tremendous impact.
Well, I haven't had an opportunity to take that page that he wants us to get the information. I need to send that over to the housing authority. They need to give us all the information on that. Where are they located? All those kind of things. Specific.
Yeah, because that's a tremendous load on our block grant funding. They usually get at least 10% of our block grant funding every year, which is good. We have to keep the housing up, but it is a significant impact, and it's good for our citizens, but it's a significant impact on our finances.
Mhm.
Has there been any consideration of creating a cluster area or enterprise zone, say on Lafayette Street, which would encourage adult housing, like they do in Shaw's Cove in New London? It's near all the medical facilities.
Just so you know, on this deck, the data deck, this is all statistical data. This is none of the comments that we have. This is them giving us statistic stuff from census and from other sources they have, even things that we've given them, like the schools have their projections. We've given them a lot of that information, but this is not them generating ideas. So we'll make sure the adult housing on Lafayette Street, you said? And you compared it to where?
Like Shaw's Cove in New London. Where all the
Shaw's
doctors,
Cove?
Yeah, off of Bank Street.
sure. And also, if anyone has any comments or you want to go read through this at your leisure, you can send me an email with comments and we'll make sure that we get it.
Did you have any comments off the top of your head about the data deck? Did you look at it?
No, good.
All right.
It was real fast. A lot of comments from city staff.
Yeah.
Getting a lot of input from them.
Yes.
Stuff they had. but-
And so just so you know, we talked about the format of this data deck, and I'm like, I was kind of confused of saying, well, is this how you're formatting our plan? Because they're going to be the one taking it together. And they said, not necessarily, but if you like some of the aspects of it. So it's interesting, some of the way they did it. So I it might be something that we want to have our plan look similar, to the data deck format. But this is just them giving us information, so.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one other thing I did have on that, about housing.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know if the data is available or when it will be available in relation to when we do the plan of conservation and development final draft, but all of the numbers associated with housing over the past year with the significant increase in costs,
Mhm.
that is not captured in here at this point.
We-
Yeah, and we just said that to them
Yeah.
last Friday. So
We did.
West
Okay.
Lake and, some of the
Yeah,
other-
some of those, but also, the prices have gone up because of rentals have gone up because of Westledge and Panima's new stock that's come online. And there was it was a conflict in here between something that they provided to us and something that was done by community development when we worked on the affordable housing. Kathy had given us numbers and it conflicts to numbers that they have. So I don't know if it was a typo on our end that we took the wrong information, but we need to fix that too. So there's a few things that just weren't matching up really well. But and it's a little bit bleaker, their numbers and things than what we really believe it to be. So like we use the median housing price, we just got that from like Eastern Connecticut Realtors or something, just kind of gave information out about this region. And it's much higher than what they had. I said much higher, but significantly enough that it would make a difference in our plan. It gives a brighter out for us. So from as far as the house prices that are selling at, doesn't look as distressed in that sense. But anyways, Dan, you have any?
Yeah, but yeah, I have one more thing on the housing there. I know most of the sheets have the source of document, like the Norwich Affordable Housing Plan 2022 and all that. But
Yeah.
Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments, SECHA, Southeastern Connecticut Housing Alliance,
Yep.
all of the Blue Ribbon Council and all of that did housing studies, and they just finished up a housing study about a year and a half ago.
We've given
And-
them that. They have all that from the.
Okay, because
Yep.
that's some good updated stuff. We
No,
just
we
had a
have.
meeting on Friday on that, as a matter of fact, with them.
They have, and we're gonna be giving them the study that was done for the base study. I forget what that was specifically called.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So no, they asked us to provide them anything like that, and they've been looking as well. Like I said, they're doing their research, but there was the conflict was on that one page, Dan, but go ahead.
That's all I had. Thank you.
I had a couple items that I
Okay.
made some comments on.
Okay.
On page 28 is home sales.
Yeah.
The data is misrepresented there as far as the scale goes. If you look at Norwich's scale, it only goes up to 1,000 on the y-axis, while New London goes up to 5,000. So I think that's probably so you can see the data, but it drastically misrepresents how much lower our sales are than New London's are.
But that's the county. That's not the town of New London. That's the county of New London.
Okay.
So I don't know if that makes a difference to you,
okay.
but that's the county.
Um,
We made sure that they weren't comparing New London specifically as a community to us. So it's the
there
county.
was inconsistency with some places said New London, and we
Okay.
want them to say New London County
Yeah.
because
Well,
it'll get
so
confusing.
if you look at those grants, those two graphs,
Yeah.
it looks like they're comparable. But if you actually look at the number, I'm not saying they should be comparable, but the way it's displayed on the graph,
Mhm.
there maybe should be a note as to see to scale or please reference scale, something to that effect, because I looked at it twice and was like, what?
Mhm.
Oh,
But it's probably because that scale would be so wide, it would take
exactly.
so
You wouldn't
much
be able to
more.
see it. is
Yes,
the
so,
issue, yes.
but maybe, like you said, maybe just a note about the scale of it.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of like really diving into the data and looking at important things to note. So we note that 66% of our households in Norwich are single family households.
What page are you looking at so we can call it up? Do you know?
That
I know it's in there, but it was,
I put it on the second set I was going to say. So that is, where are we?
no, it's housing.
17%.
Yeah, Dan and I were like, oh my God, that's horrible that there's that many people was that it, Dan? There's that one that was just that, go back.
No,
It was the one that had the tall, is that it? No.
that's unit here was built. But it basically, it says that 66% of Norwich residents are one-person households.
Yep,
And but our housing stock is only 17% one bedrooms.
Yeah, so what we're saying is that we were having this conversation is a lot of elderly people or people living by
Right.
themselves in larger homes.
Sure, yep.
So they're living in a 3-bedroom house and there's one person living there.
Mhm.
Because we had that conversation, because
Yeah.
that was such a discrepancy, but that's exactly what it is.
I can't find it, but
I know that the 17% is on page 25, but I can't find where it said.
I know. We have notes, I didn't bring
I have
my whole
notes
set on
for
that. Yeah, because 61% live in 3 or more bedrooms
Yeah.
compared to 50% in Norwich, you know?
Where else was I?
Which we were so shocked at the number. So based on that, the 60 whatever percent that we said that lives, single people live 66, whatever it was, one person household, that I was really shocked that if the schools would pass, because they're people who are single people, you know, by themselves, are they going to vote for schools, you know, and it passed. So, I mean, if you think of it that way, so. Oh,
Well, it was being marketed that if you didn't do it, it was gonna cost more. So that message may have gotten to those
mhm,
single
people.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also a lot of the folks that live are sort of transient, so to speak. So a tremendous amount of folks don't vote because they're not really part of the community. So a tremendous amount of them don't vote. I know most of the renters that we deal with, none of them are that we know. We talk to them, but they're not interested in doing voting or getting registered or anything. They don't see this as a long-term solution to their.
Folks don't have IDs. You need IDs to register.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, it's hard to hold your documents when you're homeless.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
And to get them when you don't have them is even harder.
yeah.
There was kind of a note on here, I think it was on page 32, where it talked about, I mean, we kind of just brought up how the market rate of rents was not kind of accurately described in the other data you found, Deanna. But here it talks about like affordable housing units, and I really got into that because, you know, I know we meet our standard of 10% for the city, but we're talking about 50% of our renters can't afford the rent that they have. And then I was looking at this of 40% is less than 1,000. Even if that rent was $1,000 for folks who are extremely low income, which is 78% of our renters, based on this data, that would mean that you would need $12,000 a month or a year to pay your rent. And if XL income is capped off at $22,000, that only leaves you with $10,000 left over before we talk about your utilities, your potential water or other needs. And so while that, I don't know if the data fully represents what folks in the neighborhoods are actually going through, because I just, like folks on disability, for instance, some of those folks who are going to be extremely low income earn on a high point $12,000 a year. So that's not enough to pay those rents if you're not in subsidized housing. And that $1,000, I get that it's comparable to what's going on, but for folks who are low income, it's not an affordable rent.
So I think that's why if you look at that last sentence, but this does not guarantee all affordability needs are being met.
Right,
So
right.
it's
We meet our
facts.
standard, we
Yeah.
don't meet our need is what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get at.
Yes, so, but we have more low gross rent options as compared to the county and the state, but
Right.
that still doesn't mean that we have enough or the right one, you know?
Absolutely.
So I think it's just a statistical thing and they're trying
Sure.
not to skew it in any way, but it is like factual. That's kind of what they're doing, but you're right.
I don't want them to skew it.
No, you know,
Um,
what else you got?
and then like when you're renting, you could be renting a house, but you obviously get much less for renting an apartment for $1,000 versus renting a house for $1,000. Those are, again, things the data doesn't show. And then I'll just, my last thread along that line is, so if we're comprised of 50% renters in Norwich, I know the big push is to pull commerce in to tax that to increase, but we're losing a huge portion of taxes and property owners because all of those renters don't pay property taxes. So economic development in the form of home ownership would probably have large revenues back to the city. And that's something that I'm looking into with CDBG because we can do homeowner assistance. And as you guys are talking about blight, please keep me in that conversation too, because that's another that I can assist with funding.
Oh, good. I mean, the ownership thing is big, you know, if we can get people, you know, but the
Personal
taxes are high for people, you know, so it's
But
always
the
a
tax-
balance,
But
you
the
know.
taxes are high because you're sharing those taxes over half of the population. If you
Right.
spread that out over
Mhm.
more homeowners, potentially you could
Mhm.
take a break on that, but we don't have that opportunity because you don't tax renters. I'm not suggesting to
No.
tax renters, but I'm saying we're losing.
Well, someone owns those multifamilies that are being taxed, that's for sure, you know,
Sure,
they're
sure.
renting, so they are paying taxes. But they're not necessarily the best property owners either, and they're not necessarily the most responsible. It'd be interesting to have the number of how many of the rental property owners are actually from Norwich, and I bet the number is very low.
Yeah, the tax assessor has that. We looked at that several years ago.
And was it really low, the percentage of the,
Not real low, but there's a significant amount that don't. I do know this past surge of housing, if you look in the downtown area,
yep,
a lot of the buildings that were sold to a lot of money came from out of the area, and a couple of streets were out of the country. Money came in from out of the country.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting, some of the folks that we're dealing with close to the downtown area right now in the rental properties that are have moved into the area back when the prices were low. Now that they're much higher, that, you know, everything's going to be skewed a little bit now because of the interest rates, and we're going to be like this for several years, I would suspect. So
it makes it hard for us to chase those the bad property owners when they're out of state and when they're out of the country, for sure, so.
Absolutely, and that's a hard thing. So it's going to be a couple of rough years, it looks like, just, you know, and blight and all that other stuff. So
Oh, yay.
And I mean, there's the tax revenue, but you also have the individual economic investment of
Mhm.
being a homeowner and
Mhm.
increasing assets and
Oh, yeah.
that kind of thing too. So
Yeah.
it's
yeah. I have one thing. If this is just a presentation type deal, page 24. This is just a presentation of this. It's a little difficult if you look at the right in the middle of the page, it shows all like the
Had
one.
that conversation with them. We said, we wanted to know what the difference is 1 unit detached and 1 unit attached is.
Right, that's one thing. And then the other thing is all the little colored
Yes,
squares. If they could increase the size of those, because they're difficult to define in relation to what's represented on the pie chart. The colors are really hard to
Yeah.
look at.
no, we talked about that. We also said, get rid of the boat, RV, van, et cetera, because there's 0 that fall into that criteria, so we don't even need it in there, you know?
Right,
So
right.
no, we went over this with some of the comments we had. I felt a little embarrassed to talk to the consultant, but they were sort of picayune like this, you know, it's like the colors are really hard to see when they're that small. And, you know, and can you make these changes, in a couple of, you know, wordsmithing that, you know, was kind of funky that needed to be fixed, that, so no, I hear you, and Dan and I, but like I said, what is the difference between 1 unit detached and 1 unit attached, you know?
Habitat for Humanity is doing some houses behind the Wonder Bar, et
Yeah.
cetera.
Yeah.
Can we partnership with them for some properties that we own?
They are. We're doing that with American Rescue Funds right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so they have, they received a very large chunk of money to finish those buildings back there, to finish those from the city. And they were supposed to take more properties from us to rehab. They have been very, very reluctant to take the properties that we have, as far as the quality of them. They're historic, or they need too much repair, or they're going to be too costly to heat. They have a very narrow criteria of rehabbing properties. They would rather start new. So there is 2 properties, one on Palmer Street and on New London Turnpike, the fire damaged house that's kind of kitty corner to the golf course. Those 2, we're going to take down the fire damaged house, and we're going to give them the Palmer Street so they can construct some new houses there. But we with the American Rescue Funds money, we put money aside specifically for them to rehab some of the buildings that, you know, that we get through foreclosure and it's not been a real great collaboration on that part, so we'll have to refigure that, and that might be one of those things that works. Yeah, that might be something that John and I have been talking about that. Because they're just,
Yeah, the ones behind Wonder Bar, they're real modular, they're
Yeah.
real, they're stick built,
Yes.
but they look modular the way
Yeah.
they come in. And, they're very specific needs for their clients.
yes. And that's why getting an
Because-
older historic home that's,
Bigger,
1800s,
too
at
big,
exactly, the heating costs too much, it's too big, they just, the lot size is too big. Sometimes they'll be like, hey, can we subdivide this? You're like, no, there's no, there's a big chunk of land, but the frontage is small and things like that, so they're not able to do it. So it's hard for them to rehab properties. I think they're getting away from that more than doing new construction, so.
Is the room down at the end of that road overlooking the river for a little parking area, a little scenic overlook where the Jewish cemetery is?
I think about that. I haven't been down that way in a long time.
Nice little overlook.
Keep me in that conversation too, because if they want to build new houses,
Mhm.
we potentially could fund the demolition.
I think- is
And
that
then
the
if
same
they
road
wanna
that
build,
Main
then they
Tomo
can build.
Monument
But a lot of them
on
are
or
historic
something
properties that
Right.
we're gonna
I'm
have a
not saying
hard
for
time with,
historic, I'm not saying
yeah.
for historic,
That's
but
the
yeah.
problem. That's the
Yeah.
problem. There's
But
site,
I know that,
I'm not sure.
but we're
what-
giving them
Yeah.
two, the city is
In
giving them
front of
2
where Adams
properties
was
now,
between,
so that they can
Yeah,
develop.
yeah.
Yeah, right there, yeah, that enters the little small cemetery. Really
Yeah, there
nice
is one
overlook.
down there.
Be nice to put a little parking area there, signs. and-
Hey.
Add to the list, parking area at this Jewish cemetery back there. All right, parking area. Right, that's
Yeah,
good for-
there's something else as long as they're on housing too. I didn't see anything in here on it, but I don't know, and this could be a good place to have a conversation as we're developing this, but accessory dwelling units.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, we're gonna,
Okay,
and I'll tell you why, because we have it we already have in our regulations, the allowance for accessory dwelling units. We have a procedure for it. And it was not long ago that it was adopted and put in the regs. And then the state came in and did the, what they kind of pulled as a granny pod thing, but it really isn't granny pods. It's for, anyone that has a single family to do that by right, basically with zoning.
right.
And we
right.
have, the city has to opt out. And I will tell you, I just sent the language to Michael yesterday for the city to opt out. So,
Okay.
and.
Well, and that's good, is make a
Lots
decision
of-
one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, the council to decide, but it's just, it can get out of control. It was really to force the hand of the wealthy communities to have a lot of single family residential, no multifamily, to have that density. We have tons of density and we really don't need that. What we do need, the houses that are single family that can do it, they already have an allowance in our regulations. So the state coming in and forcing our hand in a different way, we just don't feel it's needed. We've done a good job, I think, with how we control our accessory dwelling units. So that's my feeling on it as the planner, as the director. But if you don't agree with that, that's okay too.
No, I agree with that. I
Okay.
absolutely agree with it, because we have extremely high density in most of the town anyway.
Exactly.
And
Really
we're,
meant for those communities that just have been shutting people out of not having additional.
right. The different zoning where you have to have 2 acres to build a single family.
Exactly,
That type of deal. Yeah.
exactly. So anyways, that has to be adopted by the end of the year. Or else it's, the state, it just becomes effective in the community and we already have regs about it. So we want to just protect our right to think about it. And the other reason behind that too is we're in the midst of our plan of conservation development. We shouldn't be forced in the middle of that to be taking on new laws that, that could affect what we're doing. So I think that, opting out of it. And if we decide to do it ourselves, the way that the state has, we can do that anytime after.
Yep. Sounds
So-
good.
So the data deck, this set of data, it was 60 some odd pages. We just got the other day, the next data deck. I haven't even opened it yet because we're really been busy in the office right now. They are, been very responsive, but they're also giving us our time staff with Dan and I, just 2 people office to do this. And Dan is getting married on Friday. So
Oh, congratulations.
he's gonna be
Dan.
on honeymoon next week, so.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh, Ooh.
Yeah, in Mexico. So Dan and I probably won't be going over the data. I think it's great when we do it together because it's a conversation like we're having here and we kind of bounce it off each other. So that won't happen till you get back. I'll
Yeah, I
make
will not,
that
I will not be
Monday
thinking
day.
about data deck number 2.
I will make sure it's Monday morning when you get back. I'm just kidding.
That's fine.
Yeah, you can
but
take a
Not
copy
until
with you.
then.
Is anyone else have any comments about this data deck? We got everybody's comments here and I could talk to you too, some more Sydney about it. So, everyone I feel like a good place to where we're at. The consultant feels like we're doing fine, as far as our timeline. They're kind of following our movement on it. So we're gonna look at the next data deck and see what they have to say, make the corrections to this one to send them back to them. We went over the phone with some of them, but we're gonna send them some details. I'm gonna reach out to the housing authority about their units and just gonna keep moving forward, So what's our timeline, Dan, for the next things? Is it in January?
I believe so. We've got the public survey out through December.
Yep.
And then we'll kind of regroup and reassess once we close that.
Yep.
And we'll provide you with an update at that point. I think the next meeting is probably January, right, Deanna?
That is every 2 months, right? So-
Yeah. So we'll have some data from that for you for the next time. And
And as it
we'll
gets,
probably send you the second data deck via email between now and then, just to take a look for your comments.
yeah, that's good. And as it gets closer, obviously, we'll be having more and more, more meetings and pushing things together, but we're still, like I said, looking at all the numbers and we're just kind of getting comments in, and especially since the survey is still open. So we want to make sure that, we get those comments. You got something to show me?
Did you ask the consultant as to this on page 5, the rapid just jump in population?
So there,
Yeah.
yeah, Dan.
Because I thought we were declining in population and then there's just like a random curve.
So, Dan, do you want to talk about that?
So transportation, like DOT related projections are always up.
Yes.
In all my career, I've never seen them be negative. So
We
take it with a grain of salt. And then
talked about this too.
we're remarkably stable population wise from 1950 to now. It's kind of wild that it's just almost a flat line. Not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing.
Sure.
If we hit 50,000 population, that would unlock a lot more
Okay.
funding streams for us.
Yes.
Seems like a optimistic projection. That's
Yeah.
why I
It
asked you.
it absolutely is.
Mathematical basis to
It
it.
absolutely is. I would not be surprised if 20 years from now, we are 41,000 people.
Okay.
But it's usually projections are positive and we're going with what is provided
Sure.
outside of us paying for our own projection study, which is never going to happen.
Yeah.
This is just what we have to go with.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
I'm just confirming.
Okay.
We need a lot more housing.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of rehabbed housing and new housing. So.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions or?
Yeah, I have just 2 real quick ones. The data deck, is that available to the public? Or is it going to be available? to the
Well, he
public?
doesn't want it to be yet. I mean, technically, this is a draft and should not, and this is really for us to look at and to make comments on. So we don't want the public to, I mean, not that it's not public information. If the public wanted to specifically look at it, they could. We don't want to put this out there because it's just not accurate. It doesn't have all the information and things like that.
Yeah, okay.
It was
And
really, it's a back and forth tool between us right now.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I
Well,
agree
we
with that.
will be showing it less at a public meeting sooner rather than later. So there'll be a midway point public meeting and this would be part of it.
But the corrections will be made and
Yeah.
that all the information that they're looking for.
Okay,
Right.
because it is a lot of good information. The other question I have is the document we went over, the POCD stakeholder, about all the different meetings that you had. Can you send that out to the planning commission?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's good information to have, so everybody can take a look at it.
Yeah.
Try to correct who was at the meetings. Everything is correct on the meetings, but somehow the sign-in sheet disappeared and which is
Signed out.
crazy. So we'll do the best of trying to correct that. Maybe come
Yeah,
up-
yeah, whatever, but mainly all the points that were discussed, I think are really important that the planning commission takes a look at that, just to keep up to speed on this whole thing as you guys move through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll become a regular agenda item for CCP meetings too.
Yeah, and the other thing, just a brief thing on process. I know, I think this is my third POCD.
Yeah,
The second one, we did the POCD and then after the fact came in and put the implementation plan together. That whole document. And I think we lost a lot of the discussion that happened when the POCD was being developed. And then when the implementation document came about, it was going back and saying, well, I think that's what we were thinking about at this time. So what I'd like to encourage is that we capture those conversations when they happen on what the intent and what, if they talk a little bit about implementation,
mhm.
so that can be captured at the time that those discussions are being had instead of after the fact. Because if we don't capture them, the folks that are a part of that conversation are no
Mhm.
longer at the table, and we may lose some of that, some of their
Right.
intent. So,
And yeah, we agree. And we had that conversation with them too. We don't know if it's going to be a separate implementation document this time. It just might be within the document, we're not sure how we're going to do that. Again, it's a different consultant. We're kind of curious of what they've done for other communities to make sure that it's, that it has been implemented, and that it's actually moving forward. And again, zoning regulations will change, different things will change based on this plan, so.
oh, yeah, and it's got a lot of really good information. So it's, assign an ownership, who's going to follow it, who's going to push it, all that kind of stuff. It
Yep.
is important to have. So,
Cool.
okay. Thank you.
What's next on the agenda here?
Next on the agenda, we're done with new business. Public comment. I don't think we have anybody from the public here. I haven't seen anybody sign in. So
No.
is there any public that has any comments? Hearing none. We'll move on. Miscellaneous. Anybody have any miscellaneous random thoughts they'd like to put out on the table? Hearing none, I guess we'll entertain a motion to adjourn unless somebody else has anything.
I move to adjourn.
That-
Rick Morel.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have a second? Okay, and all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Great meeting. A lot of good information.
Before you hang up, I want to congratulate Melinda on her new job. She's working for the state of Connecticut, and we hope Melinda, we hope you stay on as our clerk because we adore you. But we would understand if you were just overwhelmed with your new position.
Thank you very, very much. I'm enjoying it very much.
Yay.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank
Yep.
you.
We're gonna, so,
Yep,
New
yep.
job, getting married, a lot of big things.
Yeah,
happening.
big things are happening.
Yeah,
Dan's moving too. He bought a new house, so not new house, new to him. So he's moving too. So lots of good things happening.
yeah, great.
Yeah.
All right, guys, have a good night.
Yes,
Thank
you
you,
too.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
thanks for your
everybody.
time.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.